Reason number 9, that your next boat should be a Camus, our custom bow panel. The Camus custom bow panel gives you room to flush mount up to a 16-inch graph, as well as push-button control to all of your boat's pumps and accessories. All this from the front of your boat. You won't have to go to the back unless you're putting fish in the live well. Build your next boat at camusboats.com. We are speaking with Matt Pangrac, tournament angler, fishing industry influencer, host of BTL. BTL, I got to think that everything that I do, everything that everyone's doing, it's all kind of based upon what you and Jeffrey just started at some point way back in the day. Often copied, never bested. I mean, let's face it, I think every podcaster out there wants to be Matt Pangrac. Take us through a typical day. How in the world do you make all this magic happen? You're the only guy, right?
Yeah, no, it's just me. I've got all of my systems that are here and audio and things. And I mean, it's just like, to me, it's just like any job. So I do this full time. I've done this full time, whether it be with Jeffries or that, since I was 22 years old, 23 years old, and I just turned 40 this past year. So it's kind of something that happens organically. Like when you get into it, like you can look at a plumber, a roofer, an arc, once you get into it, you understand how it's going. It seems to flow smooth. The booking of the guests, the shows, it just comes naturally. You're around it for so many years. You always, how the fishing industry is, Keith. It's not like 6 degrees of separation. It's 1 degree of separation. So if you want to have someone, someone who has that guy's number, you're in an industry where guys make a lot of their living on marketing, on publicity. It's an established show. It's easy to get the guys on who want to come on and talk about it, talk about the fishing, talk about the industry. So, during tournament season, I try to get relevant guests on based on finishes. It doesn't have to necessarily be the winner. Like I've got Terry Scroggins on this week. It's been a while since I've had Big Show on the show. It's also been a while since a lot of Florida guys caught him in Florida. So I was like, man, I want to get some Florida guys who are dragging plastics, who are fishing reeds, who are doing typical stuff like that, and it just kind of flows. And then in the off season, I try to give listeners an inside view of the industry on how it works, whether it's from the boating industry using BTL sponsors, the batteries. There's so much that makes it work. It's such a big multi-million, billion-dollar industry, but it's also really small too. So I think the more people can understand how all of the parts kind of work together, it might not be like the sexiest shows, but those are the ones that I enjoy the most when you see like kind of the inner workings behind the scenes with the guys who work with companies, who work with pro staffs, who work to develop baits, things like that. So I try to do like a mixture of the on the water and the stuff that goes on kind of behind the scenes off the water that makes the 160 guys that do this full time on the BPT and the Elite Series run smoothly.
Well, when I went on Bass Zone, when I went on the Bass Zone website this morning, you already had all your shows lined up for this week. Is that something you did this morning, or is that something you did yesterday, or at the end of last week? How did that work out?
So,
Because they're all very relevant. I mean, it's not like, I mean, who knew that Terry Scroggins was going to do what he was going to do? Who knew what Bobby Lane was going to do? And yet here they are all lined up. How does that get done?
So I keep so like during the open week, I mean, I knew I've got it. There's an invitational coming up. There's a BPT going on. You had the open this week. I've got a big calendar up on my wall that I kind of have out. So I know, so I'm keeping track of that as the open week goes on. And then, on my drive home, I'm kind of thinking who would be good guests? Who can I get on? I'm looking to see who's fishing the invitational that wouldn't be able to get guests. How can I get that on? Is there an off day that I could have someone who's fishing both of it? And it all just kind of flows. I really, instead of really planning it out, I talk with guys that I want to talk to that I think are interesting, and that's the way I've kind of rolled with it for the last 3 years. Like if I think it's an interesting show, like I would love to know how Big Show caught him. I've got Bobby Lane on Thursday. That's an interesting story. I mean, he went Elite Series, BPT, missed the Elite Series by 1 point, got an exemption, went back to the BPT, then won a BPT in front of his family and $150. Like, how do you pass that show up too? So every week it just kind of flows organically. And like I said, it's a really easy industry to work with because these guys go out of their way to make time to jump on. And with the technology that we have, all they have to have is a decent cell signal and a smartphone, and you can get a one-on-one interview with them.
I'm Keith Neiswanger. This is the Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Please remember to like and subscribe. If you'd like to reach us, please send us a direct message on Instagram at Bass Tour Anglers Podcast. Take care. Be safe. We'll talk to you next time.